right, well, welcome everyone to today's call. Today we are doing a review of module number 3, and at the end of the review, I will then open up the webinar for a Q&A session. So get ready to type in your questions. You can go ahead and type them in ahead of time or as the broadcast is going on, but the questions will not be answered until the end of the actual review. So we'll jump right into tonight's review here. So in module number 3, we actually had 6 lessons rather. So we'll quickly go through each lesson, not in detail, but just at a very high level, just to sort of refresh your memory in case it sparks a new question for you. So in lesson number 1, we were talking about mortgages in general. What is an actual mortgage? How does the mortgage work? Why do the banks create the mortgages the way they do? We then looked at different options for paying down the principal, and whether it be lump sums or increasing the payments, etc. And we did we looked at how the effect of accelerating the principal pay down actually works, and how you can decrease the number of months that you owe on that debt just by simply increasing your monthly payment or putting some lump sum payments down. So that was just a very quick look at how the mortgage actually works. In lesson number 2, we got into it in a little bit more detail with taking a look at the effect of the timing of the payments. So what we were doing there was we were looking at the effect of increasing your payments from monthly to either semi-monthly, bi-weekly, weekly. You hear a lot of banks saying that, increase your monthly payments, get rid of your debt quickly. Bottom line is it depends on how they structure that, that payment frequency, because if they simply take the number of payments you take over the course of the entire year and divide it by 52, so that you make 52 payments a year, it really has very little effect. However, if you were to take those same payments that you make over the course of the year and divide them into your 12 monthly payments and then divide that into 4 weeks per month, you're effectively coming up with more payments then, and that is what is going to have an effect for you. However, there's really no point in you doing that or allowing the bank to do that for you. That is a good system to put in place for the average person who wants to pay down the debt quickly or more quickly on their house because they aren't disciplined enough to increase the payments when they're allowed to, or save money for lump sum payments themselves. In our particular case, with the 5 Homes to Freedom program, you're going to be very disciplined, so you're going to structure the payments to fit your own criteria, and you're actually going to be making more payments, larger payments, and focusing on paying down the debt more quickly. So, for example, when you take charge yourself in year 1 of a new mortgage on one of your rental properties, you're going to increase the payment initially. When you create the mortgage, you'll ask the bank to increase the payment as much as the bank is willing to go. They're not going to allow you to use all of your free cash flow from that property to go towards the debt, because they want to make sure there's some money left over to take care of the property. So they will allow you to increase the size of your monthly payment initially. So you do that right at the very beginning. Then within a month or 2 after you get going with your mortgage payments, you increase your monthly payment by whatever you're allowed to on an annual basis. It could be 5, 10, 15%. So whatever they will allow you to do, you ask to increase it. And then the balance of the cash flow left over at the end of the year, you apply that in a lump sum payment. That's going to be the best way to apply your cash flow from the property directly to the debt reduction as quickly as possible. In lesson number 3, we then talked about generating some extra cash flow in order to facilitate a faster pay down. And obviously, the 5 Homes program talks about using the cash flow directly from the property itself. So we use 100% of the cash flow. We minimize the expenses as much as possible to maximize our cash flow. And we apply all of that cash flow to the debt reduction, whether it be the property itself or whether it be one of your other properties. I also talk about personal budget, and for myself, for example, in our current lifestyle, I know that I could easily cut back on certain things. I could eliminate the TV, for example, save $100 a month there probably. I could eliminate going to the coffee shop every day and save myself probably $5 a day in coffee. So little things like this, it's amazing how quickly you can add up $100, $200, or $300 from your existing budget and take that money and apply it to one of your properties. Just play with that. Take a look at it and see what the effect is, and then ask yourself, is that extra coffee every day really worth it, or am I better off to pay down one of my properties 1 year earlier? We then take a look at other investments that you may have. So can you redirect some of those investments, the profits from some of those investments, into paying down the debt on your 5 homes properties, or are your other investments even worth holding? So for example, I use the example of RSPs, and sometimes you're more beneficial to cash out your RSPs, take the tax loss, and reapply the money that you'll get from your RSPs into the debt reduction on one of your other properties, because it's going to produce more cash flow that much sooner. Again, it's just an idea. That's just a suggestion. I'm not telling anybody to cash anything out. It's just to give it some thought, because there are different ways of doing it. Multiple streams of income is another great source, and I use the example, if you're a teacher, for example, why not do after school teaching? Why not do tutoring on the weekends or summer school? Generate a few thousand extra dollars a year, which can be applied. If you're a mechanic, become a weekend mechanic at home in your garage, fix small engines. I know one gentleman who works in the local liquor store, but he also cuts grass and does landscaping services after hours on weekends as well, and he does very well during the summer months. So there's always different ways of generating some income. I was just giving you some ideas. I wasn't suggesting anybody do anything in particular, or suggesting that you should be doing more than what you are already, or that you should be cutting back on your expenses. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just planting some seeds of thought. Capital gains, if, for example, this came about as a result of one of the students looking at selling one of their investment properties to do some other investing. And sometimes you're better off you need to take a look at the ramifications. If you sell off a property, then you've got capital gains, and you've got all the costs that you're going to incur when you sell that property. Maybe another option might be just to keep that property, even though it doesn't fit in your portfolio the best. It might be worth keeping it and just refinancing it, taking some of the equity out of that property and applying it to one of your 5 homes properties. Again, just some thoughts. We then talked very, very quickly about the assignments, rent owns, flips, but they were going to be talked about in more detail in lessons 4, 5, and 6. So speaking of lesson 4, we then talked about assignments. Wholesaling and assignments are pretty much one and the same. And what an assignment really is just taking a contract between 2 parties and assigning your portion of the contract to another party. So with respect to real estate, I go out and I enter into a contract to purchase a property with Joe Blow, and then I turn around and I assign my contract, that purchase contract, I assign it to Betty Ann. So now Betty Ann is buying the property from Joe Blow, and I'm no longer involved in it. I have assigned that contract to somebody else. So what can you assign? You can pretty much assign anything that involves a contract. So in our particular case, we're looking at real estate, but you can also assign not just single family homes, but you can assign multi-unit properties, you can assign lease options, anything to do with real estate, you can pretty well assign it. But what is, you can also assign the opportunity to buy a piece of land. And so we're going to get into that in a little bit further detail down the road, getting ahead of myself there. How do you do it? Well, quite simply, you find a property, you put it under contract with your name and or signs behind your name. Now, some lawyers will say you don't need the and or signs. Some do. You're better off to put it in just to be safe. Then in the body of the contract itself, you're also going to insert a clause that effectively says that upon assigning this contract to a third party, you are no longer liable for anything to do with the contract, or if the person you assign it to doesn't close on the transaction, they can't come back on you. It's very simple to do. It's a one-page document that you complete and attach to the actual purchase and sale agreement. The properties that you can assign, basically what you need to do is be aware of the transactions that are going on around your neighborhood or the market that you're investing in, so that when you see a house come on the market, you identify it as being way below value, or it's in such a good condition, or it's a certain style that you know is going to be extremely popular. Then get in there quick and get it under contract with the intent to assign it to somebody else. So that's for your single family homes. You can also go door knocking. You can just place ads on Kijiji or Craigslist, whatever the case may be. And I'm sure everybody's seen those yellow or neon colored bandit signs on corners, intersections, up on the telephone poles and whatnot, where it says, "I buy homes, any condition, any price, any location." Well, it's not saying that you're going to buy the house, but you will potentially buy the house if it fits your criteria, or you're going to assign that opportunity to somebody else. So the whole purpose of those signs and any of the marketing is to get the phone ringing, to get people calling you to determine whether it's even a worthwhile deal to look at. Once you find a property, you then need to find buyers. That might be a little bit more of a challenge than finding the property themselves. So this is why you want to stay connected in the industry. Go to find out where the local real estate clubs are. Stay connected with those local real estate clubs, because when you get a good real estate deal, that would be the perfect place to stand up on stage and say, "I have this opportunity. I bought a duplex. It's $40,000 below market value. I'm willing to assign this property to somebody else. Anybody interested, come and see me." So you get 3 or 4 investors coming to see you, and obviously it looks to be a pretty hot deal. So maybe you want to get $10,000 for it. You say the first person who commits to this with a $1,000 non-refundable deposit, $9,000 upon closing, gets the deal. Simple as that. Which also leads us into how you actually get paid. There's different ways of getting paid. You can get all of the payment up front as soon as you assign the deal. Most people aren't going to want to pay you that way. They will give you a small deposit at the time that you complete the transaction. But then when the deal closes, that's when you'll get the balance of your money. So that's a little bit about assignments. We then jumped into the buy, fix, and sells. And this is a lot of fun because you can actually buy, fix, and sell a lot of different stuff. Obviously, everybody in the program is focusing on real estate, so that's the obvious one, that you can buy, fix, and sell real estate. But there's nothing to say you can't do it with automobiles. People do it with automobiles all the time, or businesses. I know a few people who specialize in going in and buying a business that is underperforming. They go in, fix it up, turn it around, and then sell it as a profitable business. Bottom line is you can pretty much buy, fix, and sell anything. The challenge with the buy, fix, and sell is that it can be risky because you can't control the market conditions. You can get emotionally involved and do more work than what's really required when you're doing the property. There's always things that come up that were not foreseen. And I've got that general rule of thumb where it's going to cost you twice as much to do the actual work, cost twice as much, take twice as long, and produce half the results. Now, if you apply that formula and the results that you get from it still meets your criteria, then by all means go ahead, and hopefully it'll be an even better deal for you. My suggestion, though, with the buy, fix, and sells is simply to hand it off to somebody else. Let somebody else take the stress away from you, because there is that potential of losing money, and just simply assign that opportunity to somebody else. So if you have a buy, fix, and sell opportunity that can generate a projected profit, let's say $40,000, then you could easily get $5,000, maybe even $10,000 for that particular deal if you assign it to somebody else. And that creates a win-win. So you can generate some easy cash without ever having to lift the hammer, get your hands dirty. Any issues at all, just $5,000, easy money for you, and then the contractor or the handy person who buys it, they're happy as well because you found them that deal. And there's always contractors properties. Joanne and I have a handful of people who are constantly looking for these types of property. Small contractors like to find these deals and line them up for winter projects to keep their guys busy and make a little bit of money on the side. Lesson number 6, we talked about the rent to owns, and there's basically 2 different types of rent to owns, which I'll talk about very quickly. I explained how the whole system works, and again, these lessons are not intended to teach you how to do rent to owns. They're not intended to teach you how to do assignments. They're just intended to open your eyes and your mind to the other possibilities that are out there to generate large chunks of cash. We talked about how to find the tenants and the buyers, and very quickly talked about how much you could potentially make on these deals as well. So very quickly, high level, we'll just go over what a purchase lease option is. So there's yourself out there as the investor, and you're advertising that you do lease to owns. You get a nice family who has seen your ad, they've contacted you, and you go back and forth and you assess that they are a good fit. Now, a good fit for me means that they are cash rich, credit poor. Now, if they're cash poor, credit poor, then they're not going to be able to fit in the program. So they need to have some cash. And then their credit worthiness. Well, if their credit worthiness is bad because they went through a marriage breakup and they're just getting back together, if they had a business that went bankrupt, or they just didn't understand how to manage their credit, but they're on the straight and narrow path now, that's okay. But if they are the type of individuals who have a lot of toys and incur a lot of debt on a regular basis, then I really do not want to be in business with them, because those type of people are addicted to credit. And even though they say they'll clean up their credit, and they're addicted to debt, even though they will say that they'll clean up and pay out all their debt and get their credit score up, they may say that with all the best intentions, but they just can't help themselves. They need to have the 2 ATVs in the yard. They need to have the new car every year. They need to have all the bells and whistles, keep up with Joneses next door, that mindset. So you want to avoid those people. So just keep in mind, cash rich, credit poor, depending on why their credit is poor. So they answer your advertisement, and you qualify them, and you decide, okay, yep, I can work with you. So then you start looking for properties that fit their criteria. Using your realtor, you go out looking for property. You don't go out looking, your realtor goes out looking for properties based on the criteria you give the realtor. The realtor finds this beautiful house for sale. Yes, your tenants like it, they're happy with it, you're happy with it. So you enter into negotiations and you purchase the property. Now you have to put 20% down on this particular property, and you're going to actually hold the title to the property, meaning you're going to own that property. Once you own that property, you then lease that house to this family with a conventional lease. You also create a separate document. It's called an option contract, option to purchase contract, and which will lay out how much they're going to pay for that property in the future. It'll also lay out the terms and conditions of how they're going to live there. So if you want them to take care of the property and all the maintenance, then that has to be laid out in the option contract. So that's a purchase lease option, where you're actually purchasing the property and then leasing it to the tenants. The other lease option is what we call a sandwich lease. So here you are as the investor again, and you can do some marketing or get in contact with the same family. At the same time that you're looking for a family, you're also looking for potential properties. Now the question is, do you look for the property first or the family first? And it doesn't really matter, because once you find one, you've got to find the other. So this makes it a little bit more difficult, a little bit more of a challenge to find a property for the right family or a family for the right property. Once you do find a family and a property that seems to be a good match, you then contact the owner of the house and you ask if they'd be willing to sell that house at some point in time in the future. If they say yes, then you enter into an option to purchase with the owner of that property, and you give them a small down payment. You also enter into a lease to rent that property. You do not hold the title to this property though. You're leasing it from that owner, and you've got an option to purchase it yourself. You then turn around and you sublet that property to the family. You also create another option contract for them to purchase the property from you, so that if everything goes smoothly, 3 years, 4 years down the road, whatever the length of the term is, when that family decides to buy that property, their credit has been repaired, they're going to come to you and enter into a purchase and sale contract. But before you can activate that, you have to turn around and activate the option contract from the owner of the rental property. So once you do that, you enter into a purchase and sale contract, you buy the property, you hold the property for literally a few minutes while you in turn sell the property to the family. So you are the sandwich, you're the meat between the bread. All right, so that is the end of the summary. So now it's Q&A time. So if you haven't already started, perhaps just type your questions into the question box. And I have a few questions already sent in that I can answer while people are typing in those questions. There is a slight delay of about 20 seconds thereabouts from the time that you enter your question to the time that I actually see it on my screen. So if there's some dead space or whatever, you'll understand why. So you can also send questions moving forward to myself at ken@fivehomestofreedom.com. So just give me a quick second here while I turn things over to the live Q&A. All right. So hopefully everybody can still see the broadcast okay. I'm going to open up my question box here. Oh, wrong one. All right. And with the, just to forewarn you, just in case we have an issue, we are in the middle of a storm watch here. We have a tornado warning. So if the screen goes blank, you'll understand why. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that everything goes according to plan. So please go ahead if you've got some questions. And I'm just playing around with my question box here, trying to sort things out. What's going on here? All right, so while I'm waiting for some questions, I did have a couple of questions sent in earlier today. Excuse me. So this first question came in from Jen. And why do banks suggest weekly payments if there's no real savings? And that's a good question, actually, because I mean, I don't really understand why the banks are doing it the way they do. Some of them will do it properly and set it up so that you are actually applying more of your payment towards the debt. But apparently quite a few of the banks are taking your total payments over the course of a year based on your monthly payment structure, and they're just simply dividing that by 52 weeks and then spreading it out over the 52 weeks of the year. For some people, it makes sense because it's easier to budget, especially if it's every other week and they're being paid every other week, so they get an automatic withdrawal from their bank. It's just easier for their bookkeeping, their handling of the cash. So that I get, that I understand. But if there's no real benefit to the principal reduction, then I don't understand why the banks do it, other than the bank is going to get your money sooner. So they're going to get hold of, on any given month, they're going to get hold of 3 weeks of your payments before the end of the month. So they're able to make use of that money in other transactions and earn a little bit of interest. The way that you can structure it is if you were to take the entire 12 months worth of payments and you divide it between 48 weeks, so 4 weeks per month, you divide it between 48 weeks, you take that monthly payment, but you make it 52 payments. So that way you're actually making extra payments towards the debt reduction. But there's really no difference between doing that and what we are proposing you do with the 5 home strategy. The biggest difference is that most people are not disciplined enough to be able to save money on their own. Therefore, structuring it that way so they increase their weekly payments a little bit
will definitely work in their favor and to their advantage. But for us, there's really no benefit. You're better off just to keep your payment on a monthly basis, because you're being paid, the rent that you're collecting is being collected on a monthly basis. So there's no other benefit. And then just focus on increasing your rents, or not your rents, sorry, increasing your mortgage payment on a monthly basis, and also putting down lump sums of money. So whatever you can't increase, whatever amount you can increase, you set aside into a separate account and you make that lump sum payment on an annual basis. Okay, so a question did come in here. How would you find properties below market value? Well, it's funny actually, because a lot of people believe that properties are not, why would anybody market a property below market value? And it's not like, well, I shouldn't say it's not like you're going to see a property advertised below market value, because you can. It's very rare. But if somebody is desperate and they want to sell their property quick, they will use the marketing strategy of thousands below market value, just in order to generate some interest and some activity on their particular listing. However, what you do see is little telltales in some of the marketing, because as a realtor, I'm not allowed to say anything that would imply or suggest that my client is a motivated seller. But you can sort of read between the lines. And so just, read the ads carefully and listen to what the realtor is saying in the marketing material. And a good marketer will imply that it is a motivated seller. Now, when you're looking at properties, just because it may not be listed below market value, it may be listed at market value, but you're going to end up buying it below market value. So, and that's more likely the case. So when you go to a property, or you see a property that looks of interest, but you just don't like the price, now your goal is to get the price as low as you can. So you're going to ask questions, and why are they selling? Well, there's a marriage breakup. Okay, well, there's motivated sellers. They're being transferred, job transfers. There's motivated sellers. Sorry, my screen's going dark because I've unplugged it because of the storm here. So you have to look and sort of read between the lines and understand what is a motivated seller. A great source of potential home sellers are actually yard sales. There's always going to be some people who have a yard sale every year or a couple times a year. Those aren't your potential sellers. But people who typically do not have a yard sale, all of a sudden they're advertising a yard sale, and sometimes they'll even say a moving sale. You want to approach those individuals because they're getting ready to sell their house. So they may or may not have approached a real estate agent already. If they haven't approached a real estate agent, then just strike up a conversation, build a relationship with them, find out why they're selling, where they're going. It must be difficult, show some empathy, and really try and build a relationship with them, and then see if they'd be interested in selling it to you and avoid the real estate fees. So if they're able to do that, you can say, well, listen, if you're thinking of selling, maybe I'd be interested in buying the property if we can come to terms on a good price that'll work for me and work for you. And if we don't have any real estate fees, that would be a win-win for both of us. So can I take a look at your house? And you set up a time to go look at it. So these properties are out there all the time. You just have to start becoming more aware of what a motivated seller is and how you can find these below market properties. Now, an obvious below market property is also one that is tired and run down. And a good real estate agent will list a property. Let's say that a house that is conventionally worth $300,000 hasn't seen a lick of paint, or it's an elderly couple that have been living there for the past 30 years. So it's very, very tired and very dated. And it's going to require at least $40,000 in cleanup and maintenance and so forth in order to bring it up to today's standards, today's market value. So a good real estate agent isn't going to list it at $300,000 because they know it's not going to sell. However, in the eyes of the seller, they still think it's worth $300,000. So the challenge is for the agent to get the price down to where it should really be, which is around the 300 less the 40,000, so $260,000. So you're going to find lots of those properties as well that are very dated. And then once you get in there, you try and negotiate it down around 250, 240, and then turn around and flip that to a handyman or somebody else who's interested in doing the work. All right, so keep those questions coming. Question from Brian: why does making payments become less effective over time? I wish there was a really easy answer to that one, Brian. The reality is there is no easy answer to it. It's sort of like the law of diminishing returns. So you can keep applying a payment to your $600 a month you're setting aside, and you're applying it directly to one mortgage. Well, at a certain point in time, the effect of that $600 is not going to be as effective as it was at the beginning of the process. So what you do is you look at applying that $600 towards one of the other properties to get the biggest bang for your buck. Which property is that? Again, that's the challenging part with mortgages, and there's no easy way to determine that other than physically playing with the mortgage analyzer and seeing what is going to work on which property. It's a bit frustrating, a bit challenging. It's just that you're going to have two different mortgages, two different mortgage amounts, two different interest rates, two different amortization periods, start dates, etc. All these variables play a factor into which one is going to experience the best benefit for that. So that's the best I can do for you in explaining that, Brian. All right. So a note here from Ed. Explain why you would start selling a property before it's actually fixed up. Okay. So this is a little trick that I learned from my mentor way back, and you have to keep in mind, if your goal is to actually buy the property, hold on to it, fix it up. I think the storm has passed. I'm going to plug this back in. Sorry. So if your goal is to hold that property while you fix it up and then list it or sell it privately, whatever the case may be, after you're done, you're looking at 3 or 4 months of work, lots of sweat equity, and you're going to run into all kinds of challenges and issues that were unforeseen. So with that, what you want to do is keep in mind what your ultimate goal is. So I said earlier that it's going to cost you twice as much, take twice as long, and generate half the results. So if your goal is to make $20,000 out of this flip over a period of, say, 3 months, well, you know that it's likely going to take probably 5 or 6 months, and you're probably only going to make maybe $10,000 or $15,000 in that time period. How happy are you going to be in the end making that little bit of money for such a long project? It's not very cost effective. So if somebody came along to you the day that you just took possession of this property, and somebody else came along to you and offered you $5,000 or $10,000 cash right then and there to buy the property from you, and you didn't have to lift a hammer, turn a screw, or do anything, get your hands dirty, you just walk away from the deal with $5,000 or $10,000 in your pocket, would you do it? Well, I think everybody in their right mind would say yes. I would be all over that. So what my mentor suggested, and what he taught us to do, is that the day that you have it in your possession is the day that the for sale sign goes up. You make sure it's a nice, clean, professional for sale sign that will attract people as well. And you also put on your for sale sign that it's broker friendly, meaning that other real estate agents who want to show the property to a potential client know that they can bring their client there, and I'm not going to steal them. I will pay the agent a commission. I'm not going to pay the full 5%, but I'll pay them the selling side of the commission, or the buyer side of the commission rather. So I'm not going to blacklist any of the local realtors. They all know that I'll work with them. And if somebody comes along within the first week and wants to give me an extra $5,000 or $10,000 over what I paid for it, then I'm all over that. As time goes on and I approach the closing or the finishing stages of the renovation, and I'm about to put flooring down and somebody's interested in buying it, I can give them the choice of what flooring they want. And if they want to upgrade the flooring, just like a developer, this is where I can start to make some potential extra dollars as well. So it's just a good marketing strategy to get your house up and listed and sold as quickly as possible. Actually, a good friend of mine is in that situation right now. He didn't listen to me. He has a house here in my local market that he purchased. He has it on the market now. He's already done a price reduction. He didn't put, well, I shouldn't say he didn't. He did put a for sale sign in the window the day that he took possession of it, but it was just one of those little ones you pick up at the hardware store. He put a for sale sign in there. He actually had a real estate agent bring a client to him, but the real estate agent was a little bit greedy and wanted the full 5% commission. And my friend said, no, no way. And he said, I'll hang on to it and I'll wait until I'm finished the renovation and it'll sell quick. Well, in hindsight, he wishes he had taken that even at the full commission, because the house has been finished now for 4 months. It still hasn't sold. And every month that goes by, he's losing about $1,000, $1,100 in interest payments on the debt that he had to borrow to do all this work. So it's not going to take long before he has to drop the price again and do a fire sale, and he's going to walk away with next to nothing, if anything at all. So there's that old saying, a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. I mean, if you have an opportunity to sell it for a profit quick, then do so. All right, so I got a question here from Donna. For the rent-to-own strategy, would you use companies that find tenants and manage the transactions, such as homeowners soon in Toronto? Well, I can't say anything about homeowners soon in Toronto. I do not know them. I would be careful about using other companies to manage and service your rent-to-own strategies. I have had a couple of students in the past involved in rent-to-own systems like this, not so much in Canada, but they were down in the US market. And what they do is they put, yeah, you have to be very careful of this. And actually this is in Canada too. What they do is the investor will find a client, put them in a house, put the deal together, and then sell the opportunity to a private investor. So if the entire project is going to make $40,000 over a 3-year period, then what the investor will do is put this transaction together, like find the tenants, find the house, put them together, supposedly screen the tenants, and then sell this contract or sell this opportunity to you as an investment opportunity. And you're not going to make $40,000. You're only going to make $30,000 because you have to pay that individual $10,000 for putting that deal together. Now, as the buyer of that deal, I wouldn't do that because I wasn't included or involved in the screening of the tenants, the qualifying of the tenants, the selection of the house. So what happens when that deal goes sideways? All of a sudden that investor's left stuck with it. So I wouldn't suggest anybody gets involved in those types of deals unless you know the individual very, very well. What I do suggest though is that if you're on the flip side, you find the tenants, you find the house, you put the deal together, and you sell the opportunity to another investor. Now, you're going to do that with integrity. You're not going to just find some deadbeats on the street and put them into a house just because they have some cash and sell that opportunity to another individual. At least I hope you wouldn't do that. I don't want any of my students operating with that level of integrity. So make sure that if you're going to be doing this, you do it with full integrity and full disclosure, and make sure, you know, there's no guarantees that any deal is going to carry through to complete fruition, but you do the best you can. So getting back to your question, Donna, would I use companies? Not really. Personally, I wouldn't. I'd rather be involved doing it myself. It's not to say that it can't work, and it's not to say that this company called Homeowners Soon in Toronto is not a good company. They may be a fantastic company. I don't know. But the thing is, there's quite a bit more risk involved for you. Well, that brings us, so Brian had a second question here actually about rent to own, so I'll continue on with that. So Brian, I know some potential buyers. How can I make dollars? So in Brian's particular case, he knows some people who are potential rent to own clients, and he's assuming they would be good clients. He doesn't know, he hasn't done any rent to own deals, but he's just wondering if there's some way that he can be paid to do this. Well, for myself, I no longer do rent to own transactions. However, in the past, I have done rent to own transactions. And if somebody was to bring me some qualified tenants, some really good tenants, and I put them into a house that worked out really well, and I was going to make $40,000 in this transaction, would I pay a finder's fee to that person who brought me the tenants? Absolutely. How much of a finder's fee would I pay? Well, I'm going to pay as little as possible, but on the flip side, I'm also going to pay them very well, because maybe they'll go find some more tenants for me as well. If they keep finding tenants and bringing tenants to me, that's like bird dogging. I'll pay them every day, every deal. So in Brian's case here, what I suggest he does is look in his local market and call a couple of these rent-to-own companies. There's people opening these businesses and closing these businesses all the time. It seems to be quite a cycle to them, because it looks easy to do, and actually is relatively easy to do, but it does require a lot of work at the same time. And it can be a little bit frustrating if deals don't go the way you expect or want them to go as well. So a lot of people will get started in the business, stay in it for a year, 2 years, and then another shiny object comes along. So you want to make sure that whoever you're going to refer these individuals to has been in business for a period of time, has done a lot of transactions, they operate with integrity, and they've got a good track record. So that may mean you have to actually go out and interview some people and just make sure you feel comfortable with them before you hand these individuals over to them. All right. Oh, Charmaine, if I don't have the necessary skills, how can I qualify a potential tenant buyer for the rent-to-own strategy? Well, it can be quite simple, actually. I mean, what you can do is just think of the cash-rich, credit-poor scenario that I presented to you. If these individuals have good jobs, they generate lots of cash, and they may even have some savings, because a good rent-to-own investor is going to want the client to bring at least 5% to the table as well, because they're not going to put a rent-to-own client into a house that they've just bought for that client unless that client has some skin in the game as well. So they have to have some cash. So you can simply ask them, do you have at least 5% for the down payment? If they say, no, we don't have anything, well, then they've just disqualified themselves virtually right then and there. Now, if they do have the cash, say, well, why is it you can't qualify? Well, you know, my spouse, she went through a divorce that went really nasty. I just went through a divorce as well, and I had no idea. My wife racked up all the credit cards, so I had to file for bankruptcy, but I'm just about to get that discharged. But right now, my credit score is crap. But within a couple of years, I'll be able to qualify again. So that's an okay scenario. If they come back and say, well, I've gone through 3 bankruptcies and a foreclosure, then that's a big no-no. Just walk away from, they'll never get financing. So do a little pre-screening yourself. And then what you can do is, if you have somebody, a mortgage broker that you're working with now, don't send every person to the mortgage broker, but suggest that they go to the mortgage broker and see about getting pre-qualified. Now, the risk here is that the mortgage broker may be able to find them financing to buy a perfect house. If they do, so be it. Congratulations, you know, be happy for them that they get to buy the house. But if their credit is as bad as they claim it to be, then they're not going to qualify for the mortgage, and the mortgage broker is going to tell them whether they'll be able to qualify in 2-3 years or not. So if they can qualify within a couple of years, then you can recommend them to the next level, which is finding a somebody who's in the business of doing the rent-to-owns. All right, Baxter. All right, Baxter. With the interest rate as low as it is, do you leverage the interest rate and hold on to the cash flowing amount? I'm not sure I quite understand. If you can expand on that a little bit, Baxter, I'd appreciate that. With the interest rate as low as it is, do you leverage the interest rate and hold on to the cash flow amount? Huh. Yeah, if you can expand on that a little bit more, Baxter, I'd appreciate that, and definitely give you my opinion. Okay, so Ed had one more question here with respect to flips. Have I done any flips? Yes, absolutely. I have done flips, and I quickly realized this sucks. Actually, I do enjoy the flips. I'm a very hands-on person. I'm a handyman. I've got all the tools and equipment, the whole bit, and I do enjoy doing the work. However, I've quickly learned that my time is better spent sitting in front of a computer, believe it or not, and doing exactly what I'm doing with you, sharing my knowledge, sharing my experiences with other people. However, I have done some fix and flips early on, especially, and I'll share one with you, which was a very, I'm trying to think if it was my very first flip. I guess it was. It was my very first flip, and it was to help my daughter and her future partner, life partner at the time, and I was pretty green. So I borrowed the money to buy the house, and we're talking a really cheap house. So the house, I ended up buying the house for $75,000. It was listed for just under $100,000, but it needed a lot of work. And I borrowed $100,000, $75,000 of which I used to buy the house, $25,000 I then used to buy materials. And the deal was that my daughter and her future partner were to do the bulk of the work, put the sweat equity in it, and then they could either move into the house and or sell the house and see a nice tidy little profit to help them get going with their life. Well, the first mistake I made was I borrowed the money from my brother-in-law, and that's in itself wasn't so much of a mistake, except that I didn't register the loan that I borrowed the money. I didn't register that loan against the security of the house that I was buying. So I just personally guaranteed it. And my brother-in-law was fine with that. But what happened shortly into this whole fiasco was that my daughter and her partner parted ways because the stress of doing the work in the house was a little bit too much, and they didn't see eye to eye. So they parted ways. That wasn't so bad, except that my son-in-law decided that he wanted to keep the house. So he registered a lien against the house and tied up the house and made it very, very difficult for me. Now, this was not a big house. It was not a big deal. The profit we were going to realize out of this whole thing was maybe $10,000, which was fine, was great for them to get started. And this is about 15 years ago. So $10,000 for them was pretty good. Well, what ended up happening was I had to end up doing all the work because there was nobody there to finish the property. If I wanted to see my money out of this property, plus he could just turn around and sell that property out from under me, and I couldn't stop him. And then I'd be on the hook for the $100,000. So there was a lot of things I did wrong in that particular transaction. The first being not documenting things properly, not having it registered in my name. It just went from bad to worse to ugly. And in the end, I walked away with absolutely nothing in my pocket, and a lot of stress and a lot of bitterness towards my daughter's partner at the time. So the lesson there is, if you're doing business with family, document so that everybody is clear and on the same page. And then register your documents against the properties. If you're the one taking on all the debt, make sure that you are the one who is on title for that particular property. So you've got something to protect, some asset to protect your investment. And then just, stay on top of things and make sure things are done properly. And when we ended up finishing that house, just to wrap this little story up, when we sold that house, I did put the for sale sign out when we started doing the renovations, but nobody came along. But as I was finishing up, I did sell the house. We had an open house, and I had several people through, and I actually had a purchase and sale agreement already completed and filled out on the kitchen table, so that when people came to the open house, they liked it. I said, well, are you interested? Well, I want to think about it. Well, what is there to think about? Well, I'm not sure if we can afford it. Well, here's what the mortgage payments would be. And I had that already calculated for them. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I can afford that. Well, what else is holding you back? Well, I'm not sure how to make the actual offer. Well, here is an offer. And here's the standard conditions that you're going to see in every offer. Plus, I've included an additional clause to protect your interests so that you can actually take it to your own lawyer for review within the next 3 days. And if your lawyer says, no, I don't like it, then you walk away from it. There's no skin in the game. But what you're doing is you're preventing anybody else from getting in to get the house for you. And they liked that idea, so I actually sold it during an open house. I ran into the lawyer one day that was representing them. He commented how good the contract was written and how fair it was for his clients. And then it was within a week after they took possession of the house, there was a water leak in the house. And it's buyer beware. I don't have to honor anything at this point in time. But a small town, I went back and actually fixed the leak. It cost me approximately $600 or $700 to do the work because it was hard to find where the leak was. But it's one of those things where you to maintain your integrity, to maintain your name in a small community, these are the things that you do. All right, so Baxter, here we go. Can you hold on to the cash flow and buy another property with it and delay paying down the principal of the existing property? Okay, yes. So absolutely. So the strategy I am teaching, excuse me, is just one strategy. And the goal is to open your mind up to other potential opportunities as well. So just because I'm saying it's 5 homes to freedom does not mean you have to buy 5 homes, stick to the 5 homes and do that strategy. You can buy 10 homes. You can double your income. You can, instead of aiming for 8 years to pay the debt down to the point that you can be financially free, maybe it takes you 12 years to pay the debt down, but you're going to have more income. So there's absolutely, it makes sense. It depends on your plan, on what it is you want to achieve, and how long you're willing to wait for that. I mean, for somebody in their mid to late 50s who wants to achieve $8,000 in the next 5 to 8 years, well, they're going to have a very different plan than if you're 40 years old and you can wait 15 years in order to achieve that goal. So if it makes sense to take that cash flow and apply it towards the purchase of another property, absolutely. That's a great plan. It's a great strategy. Right now, with the low interest rates we have, I consider that to be free money. So, yeah, for sure. Charmaine, what does it mean, lease, sell the house for a profit? Not exactly sure where that's coming from. Can you expand on that a little bit more, Charmaine? And while you're expanding on that, I'll just share one more quick story here about the fix and flip. So I just shared with you my nightmare, my first one. I'll share with you the best one on the flip side. And the best one that I've ever done is where I ended up buying a property. I had a vendor take back mortgage, meaning that the seller of the property held the financing. He'd held 100% of the financing, and he gave me the first 6 months interest free. And after that, it was at 9% interest. The property was below market value because it was in extremely rough condition. and it had rough tenants in it as well. It was 2 buildings. One was a triplex and one was a 5 units, but they were on the same lot, so same title. And I already had somebody in mind to turn around and sell this property to. So it was going to be a flip. So I put it under contract, and what I did was I paid him more than what I actually agreed to pay him, and then I asked for credits back. And we'll get into this concept a little bit more next week, I believe it is. So effectively what I would do is I say, I'll pay you, we agreed that I was going to pay him $175,000 for the property, but I was going to pay him $250,000 on the purchase and sale agreement with a $75,000 cash back. The reason I do that is that if anybody is looking or anybody sees the purchase and sale agreement, they'll see that I paid $250,000. If anybody looks up at the land registry office to see how much I paid for it, it'll show up that I paid $250,000, when in reality I only paid $175,000. So then what I did was I turned around and I sold it to another couple who were active investors who actually wanted to get in there and be hands-on and do the actual work itself. And sorry, I was reading the question at the same time. So they got in there and they were very hands-on. So the day that I actually put it under contract and had that deal in place, I approached these new investors and said, I'll sell it to you for $275,000. and I'll give you a $25,000 cash back. And but you have to manage the property, and you have to do all the major renovations that you need to have done in order to bring it up to that $250,000, $275,000 value. So that meant that for 6 months, they managed the property for me for free. They collected the rent from the remaining tenants. They put it in my bank account for me. They went out and bought the materials to do the renovations. They evicted the bad tenants, upgraded the units, put new tenants in. They did all of that work during the 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, they then bought the property from me for the $275,000, and they went to the bank to get financing based on that $275,000 plus their improvements, because they spent about another $40,000 on top of that. So they went to the bank looking for a mortgage based on a $320,000 valuation. And they were able to get that mortgage as well. So that means that I made $75,000 profit owning the property for just 6 months. I never lifted a hammer. I never walked into the property other than my first inspection of the property. Never managed a tenant, never collected the rent. So that's the type of things I've learned over the years of how to do it properly compared to the first one. All right, Charmaine's question is, what does it mean lease sell the house for a profit? It's coming from lesson six, at the steps description. So let me just get my notes here and see if I can see. It's hard to remember everything off the top of my head with the lessons. So that's lessons 4. Lessons 4, 1 to 3. Of course, that one piece of paper I can't find. Sorry about that. All right, so it is coming from lesson 6 at the steps description. Oh, lesson 6. Hang on a second here. Bear with me a second. I'm just going to open it up. I've got it right here. So lesson 6 is the rent to own lease options. Am I in the right one? Nope. Sorry, I don't want to take too much of your time here, but if you can bear with me, if there's any other questions, go ahead and type your questions in while I'm pulling this up. Module 3, lesson 6. All right, I'm just going through quickly there, and I don't even see in the lesson 6. So what I would do for you, Charmaine, is I don't want to hold everybody else up here, but I will look into that a little bit further because I'm not sure exactly steps 5 and 6. I just close it, I think. No, I'm going to have to go back and check that out for you, Charmaine, and I'll answer you directly as well. And my apologies for that. I just need a little bit more context because I got too much of that information in my head. All right. What are we doing for time? Oh, we're over an hour. Okay, so that's all the questions I have that were sent in earlier. If anybody else has any questions, please, feel free to throw them in there right now. While I'm waiting for any other questions to come up, lesson number, get my numbers right here. Where are we? Lessons 5 has been put up already, so it is there for module 5 has been uploaded already, and I will have the recording of this. Hopefully I'm getting better at the recordings of these. I apologize for the messes in some of these, but I do have the audio of this being recorded. So if nothing else, we will have the audio recordings for the last couple modules, the reviews. We'll have those up there as well for everybody. All right. And we're getting close to the end, module number 5. And module number 5 is going to be a little bit of a mind bender for some people. Somebody like Elliot, I know that you're going to enjoy this one because it's right up your alley with all of the number crunching and whatnot, and just the different scenarios. So there'll be three lessons out of this particular last one, but they're going to be big ones, and it's going to be the new strategy that will allow you to achieve $8,000 tax-free money within 5 years. And I look forward to sharing that with everybody. Question. I don't see the link for the call that occurred on Tuesday afternoon. So it's not every Tuesday afternoon. It's the Tuesday afternoon call. Everybody's entitled to be part of that as well. It's the second Tuesday of the month. So usually a week prior to the call, you'll receive a series of 3 or 4 emails to remind you and to get you to register. So it's always the second Tuesday of each month. So we won't have anything until July. Sorry, we just got somebody coming in. Module 4. Yeah, module 4 is up tonight. And module 5 then will be released. Yeah, so we'll do our review then next week for module 4. And oh, you got me all messed up now, Dav. This is module 4 that we're just doing right now. No, module 4 is just being released. You got me all messed up. Anyhow, look forward to doing this again next Monday night. And that's right, next Monday night will be the review of module 4. So module 4 was just released today. And then module 5 will be released next Monday. That'll be the last module. And look forward to talking to you then. Take care, everybody.